We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Vavam at Aleph Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 96a. On the previous summit, there was a machlokas amoroim regarding yayin hanimkar bechanus. If you have wine that's sold in the store, this kind of wine is beginning to sour, but it's not yet sour. So the question is, what kind of bracha do you make on that wine? Do you make a bor pre'agofen, or do you make a shahakal on that wine? It was a machlokas amoroim, and Abai asked Rav Yosef, what do we paskin? And Rav Yosef said, we can bring a proof from the following brisa, the Tanya, as we learned in a brisa. Habodek as achaves lios mafresh oleh truma. Let's say a person inspects a chavis, meaning he inspects a barrel of wine. He's going to use this barrel. This is the one that he's going to separate truma for all the wine that he has. He's going to use from this barrel. And so then he's separating. He continues to separate, and then he finds at some point in time he finds that the wine in the barrel has turned into vinegar. And so the Brisa says, Kol Gimel Yom Vadai, for 3 days you can be certain about it. We don't know exactly what this means. It's going to be a machlokas amoroim. Mikan va'ilach safek, and then beyond the 3 days, so it's a doubt. We don't know whether it was wine or whether it was vinegar. If it's wine, of course, then it is good truma. If it's vinegar, then it's not good truma because you can't separate from vinegar on wine. And so the Gemara now says, my kamar, what exactly does the Brisa mean? It says for 3 days we can be certain, and then for the other days we have a doubt. And we're going to have a three-way machlokas amoroim on this. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says, Hachi kamar, this is what the Brisa means to say. Kol Gimel Yomim Harishonim Vada Yayin. Those first 3 days, meaning the first 3 days when he inspected originally, he found that it was wine, and he started separating. So for 3 days, you can assume that it was certainly wine. There's no doubt whatsoever. Mikan va'ilach safek. But after 3 days, you have to say that there's a doubt. You don't really know whether it was wine or whether it was vinegar. And the Gemara explains the reasoning. My time, what's the reason? Chamra me'iloi akar. The way that Rabbi Yochanan understands is that wine, it begins to spoil from the top, meaning the top of the barrel. V'hai ti'ime v'lo akar. And so over here, he tasted it. And at this point in time, he didn't taste anything wrong. So im timsa lomar basar de ti'ime akar. So if you're going to say that right after he tasted it, it started to spoil, so it started to sour, so then have a reicha chala, then it would be a situation where basically it has a smell of vinegar at that point. V'taime chamra, but the taste is still wine because he just tasted it. And Rabbi Yochanan says, v'chol reicha chala v'taime chamra, anytime the smell is the smell of vinegar, but the taste is the taste of wine, chamra, that's considered to be wine. And what the Gemara here is saying is, let's say, according to Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of the Brisa, we understand that reicha chala v'taime chamra, chamra, if it smells like vinegar, but it tastes like wine, it's wine. And the Gemara understands that that is exactly the same as yayin hanimkar bechanus. When you have wine that's sold in the marketplace, that's basically a situation where it's starting to smell like vinegar, but it still tastes like wine. And so according to this interpretation of the Brisa, it would be like wine, and the bracha would be bor pre'agofen. That's within Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of the Brisa. And the Gemara continues with the second understanding of the Brisa of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi Amar. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, Kol Gimel Yomim Ha'achronim Vadai Chometz. It's the other way around. The last 3 days when you found out it's vinegar, so the 3 days right before that, we say it is certainly vinegar. Mikanu lahalan, but from before that, safek, we have a doubt. And the Gemara says, my time, and what's the reason? Meaning, what's Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's understanding? The reason is chamra mitasoy akar. Chamra, the wine from the bottom of the barrel, it begins to go bad, it begins to sour. Ve'emor akar v'lavadaite. And since that's true, it could be it was going bad, and you didn't realize. And so therefore, you have to have a doubt. Maybe it was bad the entire time, even right after that first inspection. V'im tim salomer me'iloi akar. And even if you're going to say it's from the top that it goes bad, so you would have tasted it. V'hatime v'lo akar. And this guy tasted it at the beginning, and it wasn't bad. But dilma Basar de ti'ime akar. Maybe right after he tasted it started going bad. Have a reiche chala. That would be a situation where the smell is vinegar. V'taime chamra, and the taste is wine. V'reiche chala v'taime chamra. And if you have a situation where the smell is vinegar and the taste is wine, chala, that's considered to be vinegar. And so the idea is that's why it would be a suffix in all of those situations. In all of that time before the 3 days already, when you checked and it was vinegar the 3 days before, there we say it was certainly vinegar. That's vadai. But before that, even though you checked, let's say, and you found it was wine right at the beginning, but you still have this doubt because reiche chala, v'taime chamra, is considered to be chala. You have a doubt that's maybe what happened. And again, according to this understanding, according to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi's understanding, so if we're going to say that it has the status of vinegar when it smells like vinegar, even though it tastes like wine, so then in the case of yayin hanimkar bechanus as well, that would be considered like vinegar, and the bracha would be shahakal. And the Gemara continues with the third explanation of the Brisa. The Romoi Masnu Mishmeid Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi in the south, they taught in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rishonim, those first 3 days after you inspected it and it was wine, Vada Yayin, we can assume it's certainly wine. Achronim, those last 3 days when you inspected it and it was vinegar, meaning the 3 days right before that, vadai chometz, we can assume it was certainly vinegar. And So'im, in the middle days, suffik, that's a doubt. And the Gemara wants to understand this explanation. Hagufa kasha, that seems internally contradictory. Amrit rishonim vadai yain, you said that the first days are certainly wine. So alma reiche cholav etayme chamra chamra, that we would see from there, that if it smells like vinegar but tastes like wine, it's considered like wine. That's why the first 3 days, it's certainly wine. V'hadar amrit, but then you said achronim vadai chometz, that the last days are for sure vinegar. Alma reiche cholav etayme chamra, so you see from that if it smells like vinegar but tastes like wine, so chala, so then it's considered to be like vinegar. And the Gemara continues and answers, really, if it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, it's wine. However, those last 3 days could go in deshtaka chala sipatka. The case is that you found not that it was vinegar, but that it was a very strong kind of vinegar. The lav da akar tzlasa yuma, if not for the fact that it went bad for the 3 days, lo have mishtakach chala sipatka, you wouldn't have found that it would be such a strong vinegar. And the Gemara continues, Kaman Pashat Le. So now you have 3 versions, or 3 understandings of this brisa. So which one was Rav Yosef following? And the Gemara says, Pligi bar Rav Mari for Rav Zvid. That's a machlokus between Rav Mari and Rav Zvid. Chad Amar Rav Yochanan. One says that he was going like Rav Yochanan. Again, according to Rav Yochanan, if it smelled like vinegar and tasted like wine, it's wine. And so therefore, if it's yayin hanimkor bechanus, which is exactly that scenario, it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, the bracha would be bori pragofen. The Chad Amar Rav Yoshua ben Levi. And the other one says, no, he was answering in line with Rav Yoshua ben Levi, that if it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, it's considered vinegar, and then the bracha would be shahakol. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. Itmar, it was stated the following, machlokas amoraim, hamocher chavis yain lechavera, one who sells a barrel of wine to his friend, v'chmitz, and it turns to vinegar. Amar Rav says, kol gimul yomim harishonim, for the first 3 days, meaning if it goes bad within the first 3 days, b'rishus mocher, that's in the possession of the seller, meaning it's not considered to be a good sale. The seller is responsible for the fact that it turned to vinegar. Mikan va'elech, but already after 3 days, at that point it turns to vinegar. B'rishus lokeach, it's already in the rishus of the lokeach. It's already in the possession of the buyer, and it becomes the buyer's loss. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Vav Amud Beis.